And we'll disable the waiting room. Right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're going to leave it just a couple more minutes before we start, just to make sure people have a chance to join. So the session code today, just for reference, is 3K, and I'll put the link in the chat. So please do remember to submit feedback at the end of the session, or whenever if you have to drop off early, just please don't forget to do that. It is very, very valuable for not only the speakers and the panelists, but also for GSE as an organisation. So I'll just put that in the chat now. Okay, so the link is in the chat, and I will hand over to John. This is the session, the next generation of mainframers, the Open Mainframe project, collaborating with GSC to deliver this. And just in advance, we appreciate the time for everyone involved in organising this, and obviously the time of all the panelists. Take it away. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Next generation of mainframers. We're really excited to be a part of this event, and we have a really, really great panel here to dig into this. We'll talk and sort of dig into each of our panelists in a minute. I just want to kind of give everyone a little bit of a context on the session, just so you all know what to expect. First, let me introduce myself. My name is John Murtick. I'm executive director here of the Open Mainframe Project. I work here at the Linux Foundation, and I work across a number of vertical projects. But one of my main ones, one of the ones I've worked on for going on 9 years now, is the Open Mainframe Project. The only thing probably that has a longer tenure than me on this project is the mainframe itself, with its 60-year birthday just this month. And we want to really wish it a happy birthday, and also to the lineage even before that. There's so much in open source that we accredit back to the mainframe in so many different ways. And it kind of digs into a lot of our panel topics here for today of what truly is open source on the mainframe. Is a career in the mainframe world very successful? How do you get involved, and where do you learn more? And for a little bit of context on the Open Mainframe project itself, it's coming on 9 years, and it was really originally built around the Linux on the mainframe, but has expanded out to ZOS and just really open source in the mainframe in general. And the idea of a group like this is it provides a vendor-neutral home for collaboration around these open source projects and technologies to thrive. All of the projects here are completely transparent, completely open to anybody to participate in, learn more about, use the tools and the code that comes from it. And we put a lot of effort and energy here into ensuring that these are great exemplar examples of how to do open source. And you can see here, we have a large list of these projects here. You can learn more about all of these on our website. Just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea, and one of the big topics we're going to undoubtedly talk about here is going to be Zoe, and I'm sure that's one that the team's very familiar with. Zoe is a technology that I think really tells the great tale of what vendor-neutral collaboration is all about. It has brought together not only the top vendors in mainframe, but the larger mainframe vendor ecosystem and customer base, students, enthusiasts, of all sort of answering the question of how do we modernize how one integrates with ZOS applications and services. And the tooling that is provided here really helps fill that gap where vendors before, if they're building these services to connect to off mainframe services or different line of business units or CI/CD systems, this was often a very homegrown technology. And now this is something that there's a commons that everyone can build and leverage from. And you can see here of the impacts, from that over just the past 6 years here. So without further ado, I want to introduce our speakers and kind of give them each sort of a bit of a chance to talk a bit about themselves. The first one I want to introduce is Jessie Lane. Jessie Lane, maybe if you want to say a few words about yourself.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Jesslyn Panabayan. You can call me Jelly. That will be much easier. I'm a tech I'm a tech evangelist and senior support specialist for Dynatrace. And yeah, I've been an advocate for Open Mainframe project. I do love mainframe modernization, and currently I'm working with AI ops in general that focuses on mainframe as well. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Next, I want to do Michael. Michael, if you want to talk about yourself.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Excited to join this great panel today. Again, my name's Michael Bauer. I'm an engineering manager here at Broadcom working in the AI ops space. I also have a lot of prior experience working in the DevOps space. In addition, I was on the initial teams that innovated and developed the Zoe project. Most of my expertise was on the Zoe client side tools. So I'm sure we'll dive into that a little bit later, but those are things like the Zoe command line interface to automate ZOS actions from perhaps a distributed platform or a Jenkins CI/CD pipeline, and then also into the VS Code extension landscape. And then more recently, in addition to being a advocate for the Open Mainframe project, I've also been designated as an IBM champion. So I continue to promote the great platform that is the mainframe in a variety of different events, different conferences.
Awesome. Thank you. And Rochelle, if you want to talk about yourself.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me. So my name is Rochelle, and I'm a software engineer at Beta System Software. But before that, my mainframe journey really started out of university as an apprentice in part of the apprentice program. And after that, then I moved to several different roles in the mainframe. I was a business analyst, production support, and then I finally landed in a role that was introduced me to Open Mainframe, ZSMF, Zoe, and Zoe CLI, Zoe Explorer, and all of that. And now I've come full circle. I'm working in a role that allows me to now train or lead trainings with our apprentices. So it's a full circle moment for me, and it's a satisfying role to teach them and also meet these future mainframers and show them what now we can do with the mainframe.
That's awesome. So we got a strong set of panelists here, and we have a lot of great questions here, but I think Anil also posted here in the chat. Feel free if you have questions throughout to drop them into the chat, and we can kind of interject them in here. We want to keep this as a very interactive, lively forum. So let's get kind of started here at the top. I think each of you kind of touched on this a little bit, but maybe expand a touch on each of what your mainframe journey is, and maybe just sort of talk a little bit about the angle of like as these new opportunities, what was it like for new opportunities to rise? And then, as an audience member that might be thinking about this, how when these opportunities arise, how should one think about this?
I could start.
Go for it.
Yeah, so for me, my mainframe journey, well, of course, it started in the Philippines. So after graduation, I joined the programmer trainee program, and it's like a training for new developers, and it's like a two topic thing. So one is VB and the other one is mainframe, and I chose mainframe, so I became a COBOL developer. And then after that, after 3 years, I went to Singapore as a COBOL consultant for a bank, I think for Europe. And then after that, I went to Czech Republic to be a mainframe support engineer for IBM. And then I joined Broadcom as an application developer. And now I'm here in Austria as a support engineer for mainframe and AI, specifically in OpenTelemetry. So for me, how did new opportunities arise? I think some pivotal moments for me is like one is the programmer trainee where I chose mainframe. And I specifically chose mainframe because it's very intriguing. I do like a challenge. I do like being resourceful. So I learned, or I got a great mentor where she taught me how to be resourceful and in the coding and how to get the data. So I really like that. And then after that, one pivotal moment for me is also in Czech Republic, where I was hired as a support engineer because I have an experience in application development, and now it's like a system engineer. So it's like a expansion of my knowledge, and it's a very different skill set. And then when I went to Broadcom, it's now mainframe modernization, where it gave me an opportunity to expand here in Dynatrace and learn about AI and more observability stuff. So for me, if I'm gonna give you a let's say, an advice of being mindful of. It's about expansion and extending your knowledge. I think it's a consistent learning here in mainframe, and it's not mainframe. You can really learn a lot of things here. And that's for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Michael, Rochelle, kind of tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in. So I've had a slightly different experience. I guess right out of university, I joined CA Technologies, which ultimately was acquired by Broadcom, and I joined as a software engineer. And when I joined the company, that was before we had the innovation that is Zoe today. So we learned sort of the tools of the trade and how to be productive software engineer working on mainframe applications. And we learned all these different tools, ISPF, JCL, Rex, etc. And then we started working on application development essentially for our products. And there was some innovation happening around this time. We had sort of the emergence of APIs on the mainframe platform. And we thought, well, that might give us a way to connect mainframe to other tooling used in the distributed world that we may be more familiar with, that may enhance our productivity in developing these applications. And we started building a command line interface on top of these REST APIs. And this command line interface, it would allow us to take advantage of distributed tooling, especially in terms of test automation and using unit testing frameworks like Facebook's Jest or Mocha, and using assertion libraries and things of that nature. And at that time, I started to transition from a software engineering role into a product management role. So the product owner for what became the Zoe command line interface. And then now that we could interact with the mainframe off platform programmatically and through this CLI by typing commands, we kind of thought, well, how could we make this experience even better? And then we turned to the editing experience, right? We could trigger all this automation, but as far as editing different data sets, yeah, you could run the CLI to pull the information locally, change it, and then push it back. But could we have a more integrated experience? And that was sort of when we initially started developing the Zoe Explore VS Code extension. And I think what's really significant about that, and we'll talk more about this later, but after that was delivered, there was a lot of software built on top of it that leverages it. And if you go out to Visual Studio Code Marketplace today and search mainframe, you'll find a lot of extensions to help you get started. And then over time, I've had a couple of different roles past beyond Zoe. So I worked briefly product manager in our DevOps space, also worked in the area of software supply chain security. But now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm an engineering manager, and I'm hiring newer folks into the mainframe environment, sort of where I was about 10 years ago. But the pattern's a lot different, right? Because we can enable these folks with the Zoe technology. They can leverage VS Code extensions. They can leverage things that are familiar with them, to them, and the onboarding time for them is much faster. They still have to learn the specifics of the application. They have to learn the specifics of the mainframe, but as far as the tooling, the access methods and things, they're now familiar with them, and they can bring a lot of their distributed knowledge to the table and start producing value a lot quickly. But that's pretty much my journey from really software engineer to product owner, product management, full circle back to engineering management.
Awesome. And it's such a fascinating, and it kind of like has some interesting correlation. I mean, I'm really excited where Rochelle's story is, but the meandering sort of through time, and then the opportunity to basically be a mentor to the same person you were 10 years ago is really fascinating.
Right.
Rochelle, tell us about your path here.
Yeah, sure. So I sort of started the same way, both with Mike and Jelly, because as I said, I was a mainframe apprentice. And so I immediately found mentors, and our apprenticeship started with the basics like of ZOS and mainframe native tools, mainframe programming languages, COBOL, Kits, JCL. So really it built the foundation for me for my career. And because of that, I was hired as a mainframe consultant in various like other global services companies like Wipro or IBM. And that's where I learned really more mainframe skills, but also customer environments and what different banks in the different worlds or financial institutions or other like mainframe customers are experiencing and within their software development lifecycle. And so that brought me back to software development. And yeah, as I said, was where I was introduced to working with ZSMF, Zoe, this REST APIs and other tools. And that span of me learning about that in the few years I spent in that first role, I learned Python, TypeScript, JavaScript, Jest, all of the other tools like in a short span. And that to me is very exciting because I was quickly onboarded and I learned all of these things and now I can share them back to the community. And so to me, that's such a joy that when I'm teaching now these new apprentices, we can go through it quickly, ZSMF, CLI, Explorer, and so on, Git, Jest, Jenkins. So I can show them, like, my always question is, if I had known about these tools when I was starting, as you said, like how could I have used these tools in my day-to-day task when I was production support, when I was doing disaster recovery, when I needed to quickly check the status of jobs, like how could I have used these tools that now I know? So yeah.
That's awesome. I think a fascinating part about all of your stories is, you've been around here for a while. Like this isn't like an early flash of hand, and even for, I think especially for Jelly and Rochelle, and I would even argue a little bit with Michael, you've kind of like morphed in where your engagement has been. I mean, Jelly and Rochelle, you've changed employers, but you've still stayed dedicated and wanted to make sure when you're making those changes that you're still in this mainframe community. And Michael, as you even moved within your roles, it's all about how do I continue to engage and be a part of this community. What is each of your favorite part of it? Like what kind of drives you to say, gosh, I really love this community?
Yeah, I think for me, it's how close everyone is. What's really interesting is you go to these conferences like Share, like GSE, and you see folks time and time again, and these folks are also in the community and they help you in different ways. As an example, I had someone in our organization who sits near me, and they were searching for some help on Stack Overflow, and sure enough, one person, Lionel, he had responded to their question on LinkedIn or on Stack Overflow, or at least provided the answer. And then I was in a Share conference a couple of weeks later, and sure enough, he was there. And I'm like, kind of like, what are the chances? I meet this person who helped another person out in Mainframe. I think it's just a lot of everyone working together. And a lot of folks know each other, willing to help each other out, and especially through the opportunity for me that the Open Mainframe Project has been, the ability to work hand in hand with IBM and other vendors in the community as we work to just ensure this platform continues to be a platform of choice going forward, and how we can onboard folks into the future.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Jelly, Rochelle, what do you love about this community?
So for me, to be honest, I really love the passion for innovation. I mean, when I started joining the Zoe or the Open Mainframe project, I did find a lot of people who are passionate to contribute. They want to try it out, they want to talk about it. I've talked to a lot of people who wanted to contribute with the SDK, like somebody who contributed Swift. I was discussing all of the flow with them, and they wanted to contribute with a mobile app. It's like it's a very passionate group, this mainframe community, and they really love sharing their knowledge because I feel like everybody has their own thing. They have their own knowledge on each part of the mainframe because mainframe is so big, and that's what a lot of people don't know about it. And they really love sharing their knowledge on this part, and then we work together so that we could have an innovation in some of the areas in mainframe, and that's my favorite part.
Yeah, to me, I really like the learning culture that we have. And it goes both ways. Like some people are in the more traditional parts of mainframe with really not deep knowledge of the mainframe native tools. And they're now learning all of these new tools. And then you get people from the distributed world, and then they're trying to learn all of these mainframe concepts. And as Jelly and Mike said, that this community is passionate about sharing. And so if you just ask questions, you would get answers. If you need some support, whether that's on the mainframe side or on some new tool, you will get answers, and people are really open to share that. So there's a lot of learning opportunities. I know in the Open Mainframe project, we have webinars, and just within Zoe as well, we have webinars and just a lot of really great opportunities to learn from each other. And so to me, that's very, very important. And that's my favorite part as well.
Yeah,
So it's
I wanted to jump in there really quick and add to that point, Rochelle. I think that's a great point in that, both parties, folks coming into the space new and those in the space for a long time, bring a lot of value to the table. Just as an example, we were building out, APIs and CLIs, and we're like, okay, now we can automate things on the mainframe. But for example, at that time in my career, I was still relatively new, and I was like, well, what do we want to automate? You know what I mean? And folks are like, well, I'm like, what do you do a lot? And they're like, well, we compile and deploy COBOL, CI/CS, DB2 applications. And it was kind of like, oh, well, how do you do that? Can you like record yourself kind of going through those steps? And then they did and shared that information. And then we were able to put it in like a modern pipeline. So then we had that documented as code, and then we were able to share that back, right? But there's a lot of knowledge on both sides. Like as an example in that situation, like I had some knowledge on, how I could automate different things. And they had the automation on how to, compile, deploy and run a COBOL Kix DB2 application. And together, we're sort of able to make it happen.
Yeah.
That is very awesome. Of kind of that context in there. And I think it sets up really well of kind of a story I'm hearing from all of you is this community is one that you don't necessarily have to have all the knowledge coming into. A lot of times these folks are just so excited that I don't want to say that they care, like, but I think they have such passion for the topic that somebody coming to them and really wanting to care and learn about it, they're all in and they're there for you. I mean, is that kind of a very fair statement?
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, everybody got their back. They're willing to help, and they're willing to share.
Yeah.
And if let's say they don't know the answer, they're gonna research it with you or try things out with you. So I think that's really, you're right.
Yeah, just to add to that, I was talking to a person yesterday in the mainframe community, actually just last night, and they were telling me that, there's not much more exciting for them to share their knowledge with someone who's, ready and eager to learn, to try to transition that experience on. So I absolutely agree.
Yeah,
for
I
sure.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think Jelly, you were saying the mainframe community is so wide, and there's so much in there. So somebody who's coming in new,
Mhm.
it's probably a little daunting of where to plug in, and especially if they're coming in an area where they just don't have that mainframe experience. Maybe they have open source experience, or maybe they have some mainframe experience, but they're not sure on the open source side. Like, what would be y'all's recommendations of how someone should get involved?
I was talking to a colleague of mine, and he said that for him, mainframe feels like it's like a single opportunity that will be available, very rare, and then you need to grab it. So for me, it's somehow what he's saying is that he wants to be part of the community, but it's so few opportunities to be able to get to mainframe, which I don't believe that's true, because I for me, if you want to get some mainframe experience, there are a lot of tutorials, or just in Open Mainframe project, we do have the COBOL community, COBOL group community, where they're teaching COBOL. There's an open education. They're teaching a lot of about mainframe, and then IBM has a lot of resources as well in this. And we have these webinars, we have these conferences where you can learn from each other. And I think that's the great way to start. I guess additionally, for since I started, because for me, I didn't learn this from school. I learned this as a part of a programmer trainee. So if they have some knowledge regarding this, maybe they could go to banks or some programmer training offered by an IT company. Then that focuses on mainframe, that's also a great way to get mainframe experience. How about you, Mike and Rochelle? Do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I think you know, you highlighted one of the challenges, which is, you know, mainframe isn't front and center in the education system, in your, you know, college curriculum, your university curriculum, in for computer science really in general. Now there are some universities that are promoting and teaching mainframe, and I think that's great. But for those that don't, the next question is, how can I get access sort of to a mainframe system to play around, get hands-on sort of real experience? And I like what you said. I think, you know, the COBOL programming course offers access to a live system for you to learn and play around with. And I think, you know, I think that's a great way to get mainframe experience before possibly getting into employment. If someone's interested in open source, and you have mainframe experience, welcome to the Open Mainframe Project. We'd love to have you. You know, there's a lot of different projects in there where your mainframe experience can be leveraged. You know, if you have COBOL experience, even you know, join the COBOL programming course. If you have JCL experience or X experience, you know, join the Open Mainframe Education Project. You know, also on the COBOL programming course, just thinking of some current initiatives going on. If you have a like Kix expertise, especially COBOL Kix DB2 applications, we'd love to have you there. So there's lots of places to join in the open source community. Definitely having mainframe experience there is a huge bonus in those projects.
Yeah, and to add to that, I would say that look around, maybe in your university, there are some programs that they have tie-ins with mainframe companies. For example, in Open Mainframe, we have collaboration with Marist College. And in our company in Beta Systems, we have tie-ins with several universities, one of which, for example, was University of Leipzig in Germany, and we just donated a Z14. So these students now have their first really touch with the mainframe because the university offers courses on it. So to me, it doesn't really hurt to ask around, be curious, ask questions around your university if they have programs, or if, yeah, mainframe companies around you have apprentice programs as well that you can join. And another thing that I thought of was mentorship. I don't think I would be able to really progress in my career if I didn't find mainframe mentors. And I know that within Zoe and within Open Mainframe, we have a mentorship program. So I would suggest to, yeah, join the Open Mainframe community in our Slack. And then there are, I think, open calls to mentorship. Maybe John, you can talk more about that. But
yeah, no, I mean, we're right now, if you go to mentorships.lfx.linuxfoundation.org, you can search for a number of mentorships for this summer. We just announced, you know, across a lot of our projects, Zoe, COBOL programming course, Feilong, a number of others as well. And, you know, I think we have seen so many folks as that is their first touch point into this community. And I would say the majority of folks that come in, they get employed, they find jobs, or they're even just stick around with these projects. And they become really, really huge assets and advocates, and help bring in even more folks. I mean, we hear stories about mentees that have such a great experience that they go tell their friends and say, hey, you should apply. And then they get involved and they go tell their friends. I mean, we see, you know, I think last year alone, we saw, you know, well over 700 students apply for these programs. And it speaks to the interest in this space, but then also as these students are looking at their careers, what are the opportunities out there? And this opens a ton of their eyes to, wow, there is some really, really good opportunities here that don't necessarily kind of always float to the top in a lot of other areas. And this is drawing that attention.
Yeah, I agree. I think another part of being in the open source community, the more that we can cultivate this talent, whether it's students. So the knowledge base grows and grows, and so our community it's growing, and so other companies will also adopt this open source kind of culture, and just looking forward to how can we innovate more and more.
Absolutely. And if you're following in the chat, there's some really, really good links that kind of parallel some of the discussion here. So there's links about our I Am a Mainframer podcast, which is if you're liking to hear some of these stories and you want to hear more, go listen to that podcast, because that is a great way to understand the stories of how people got into mainframe, and the people you're seeing here, a number of them have been guests on it before, so you can learn a lot more about it. Additionally, there's great links to the COBOL programming course that we spoke about, and how to take part and how to even just go through the course. We see tons and tons of learners go through that, and it's a great sort of first experience. And then also there's a link to the mentorship program as well, and that we're accepting applications. A couple of questions are coming in the chat. I think one we kind of addressed a little bit about advice to somebody who's kind of coming in new to the mainframe world general. I think we talked about it a little bit. I don't know if anybody would have anything more to say on that, or.
Yeah, I can add 1 point there, John.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I would say my advice is, I think we touched on, if you haven't yet entered, sort of the workforce or as part of a team. But I wanted to give some advice here too. After you join a team, try to absorb the information that is being presented to you by other team members, but be confident to come in with your own thoughts, right? Because this is a changing space, and you also bring good ideas to the table, and I would encourage you to voice those. And I think that's important as well. As I was saying earlier, everyone brings value to the table, and I would encourage you to sort of present your ideas as you're learning as well, because sometimes or a lot of times the best answer is sort of a middle ground in a lot of cases.
And I think that's actually a great segue into a question Andy put here in the chat of, you think of often these projects are for technical folks, developers, sysprogs, folks of that area. What would be opportunities for folks that maybe don't have that development knowledge, experience, depth there, that you can get involved in these projects if you find a lot of interest just in the mainframe area as well, but maybe you're not as technically strong where you feel like you can make good code contributions?
For me, I'm actually thinking about this because I'm a very technical person, but in a way, my career has been changing into, let's say, a developer advocate, wherein I'm doing a public speaking and more on presentation stuff. So if you're not more on the technical side, but you do understand how to present, how to convert this technical jargon into the presentation that everybody can understand, you can also contribute in that area. Just talking about it. And yeah, I guess that's it for me.
Michael,
Yeah,
Lachelle, any thoughts?
yeah, I'm trying to think exactly maybe what roles you're interested in understanding, if the Open Mainframe project could benefit them. But certainly, there's a lot of different paths within the mainframe and a lot of different opportunities. And I think there's a lot of educational projects like the COBOL programming course, like the open a mainframe open education project. And they're looking for folks to help build out educational resources, and they're not all related to code. Some of it's related to why the mainframe remains an important platform today, understanding the different roles and different folks, participating in the ecosystem, and even somewhat beyond that. We've also had folks come in from, perhaps a documentation angle. Maybe they don't do much, I would say, programming, working on the source code for the products that are delivered, but they want to help build documentation to make it easier for folks to onboard or convey the value that's being added by these technologies. And they're able to help out a lot. And along the way, they're learning different aspects of the mainframe. So, you know, that's just one that jumps to mind. Like if you're interested in technical writing and you want to contribute to documentation on the mainframe, perhaps an area to start is get involved in documentation in these open source communities. That's one that jumps out. But if you had a specific role there, like documentation or support or product management or sales, I think that would help us maybe better answer that question.
Yeah, I agree. Even, for example, if you're in the product management space, for example, and you have experience with different customer environments, even just your feedback, do you think this product or the way that this project is going will help your organization? Like being part of that conversation and going to this like project planning reviews, for example, or some demos, and then you can provide your feedback. I think that's valuable to the community as well. And I think the teams are passionate, and also they listen to this feedback and incorporate that. I know that there are issues, for example, on GitHub that people are opening just based on their experience in their own companies. And so that's valuable information as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's a really interesting sort of angle there. You know, I mean, it's often thought in open source, and we see this in other open source communities. It's not unique to here that the only way you can get involved is if you have code. And sometimes we see a lot of folks that they're technical, but maybe they just don't write code. Or their code, you know, they don't feel like there's as many things. And it sounds like what you're saying is like just being involved, jumping in, documentation, asking questions, helping answer questions, sharing stories of where they see, you know, use cases out there. You know, I saw Andy kind of continued on there a little bit around in a pre-sales environment. And, you know, oftentimes pre-sales is doing things like discovery and is doing things like, you know, even building up POC systems and trying to understand that. And being able to understand where these projects could fit in, but then also saying, hey, I'm seeing this out here. Is this maybe something that the community would want to invest in? Or is this an area where, you know, there might be some things to add on to Zoe or adjust, or maybe a new project in this area could be of value? I mean, it seems like that's sort of a theme. It sounds like you're all saying is like there's just so much even around the project that isn't specifically writing code. But if you understand this technology and you're an enthusiast, you have places to plug in.
So I just wanted to add, because Andy said regarding pre-sales or like support analysts. So what I wanted to say is like there are a lot of use case that you can use open mainframe. So for example, I did create a POC where I used to fire the APIs, just the Zoe APIs, to get the open telemetry traces of the mainframe jobs, and then after that I put it into an observability platform. And with that, if you're in pre-sales, you can use Zoe as a, you know, John said, like a POC for just firing APIs, and you don't really need a deep knowledge in firing APIs. You know, you can just try it out. You can just fire an API and then, you know, do a POC. So, and it's the same with support analysts, because once you got those traces, or once those data, you can create alerts, or you can create a dashboard for yourself, and you can do that without having a deep knowledge in the open mainframe code.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd say that's a great point. You know, a lot of times in pre-sales or what have you, there might be a lot of integration use cases, and because these APIs are open, you can integrate them in however you want. I'm gonna post a link here to actually the Zoe CLI web help, which could give you sort of a flavor of the different technologies you can integrate with and the different commands you can fire. One thing to remember too is even if a command's not available there that you believe you would need, if you can submit a job and get the information back in the job output, that's a solution available here as well, because these commands allow you to run jobs. You know, you could wait for them to complete and then parse the response code is another option.
Very cool. Very cool. Also kind of one of the questions from Andy here, which is a really good one, is just around open source. You know, it is well, the mainframe community is one that the open source movement kind of looks back on and has so many roots in. As it comes to customers and things like that, sometimes there's friction in that area. Sometimes there's areas of like, how do I trust it? It's code that anybody can see. I mean, is that a risk? What sort of pushback and things have you seen around the concept of open source in this community, and kind of what are some of the things that you would say or even comments you've made back to that?
I think Mike, being a PO, has great answers to this.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks, Jelly. I would say, the largest challenge with Zoe was getting the initial adoption. Once we had that from a few customers, things started to roll forward a little more smoothly, a little faster. I would say, the a lot of the concerns about code being open, to your point, everybody can see it, but that can also be a benefit as well, right? Because we can all see it, we can all run different code scanning utilities on it, look for problems and resolve them together. It also leverages, open source libraries, and then you get into, possibly software supply chain type concerns, which I have some experience in there. But we're following best practices within these open source communities. We have badges that certify we're following like CI best practices and things of that nature. So if there is an issue with a third party library or what have you, they're resolved very quickly. And by following these best practices of leveraging these libraries that are leveraged by many other products, for example, in the distributed world, they have more than just like the eyes of the mainframe looking at them. They have the eyes of the whole software development community. So if there is an issue, they end up getting resolved fairly quickly. So in some regards, you would have even more confidence in open source projects than you would code behind closed doors, because those things could have issues in them, but they're not visible to folks trying to protect these systems in general. So I say in some ways, it's a benefit. Yeah, I was trying to think about the early days of Zoe here, about some of the challenges. Another challenge that comes up is even before you get to some of these open source client tools like Zoe CLI and the VS Code extensions, I'm going to open up APIs on the mainframe. This isn't necessarily open source code, but it's just APIs that are accessible from remote machines. And actually, there's projects within Open Mainframe Project and within Zoe that sort of standardize and access to those services and make sure they're secure. As an example, I've heard in a lot of organizations that if they need to stand up a REST service for a particular product, they have to go through a process to open up a port on the mainframe, right? A couple things. One, that process is tedious and somewhat can be painful to get that access. And two, there's a reason for that process, right? Because you're opening up another security concern. But Zoe, for example, one of its technologies is an API mediation layer, which standardizes access to all those downstream APIs. So you only open up one port on your system, and then you get standardized security through that API mediation layer. And it also provides things like single sign-on as well and user benefits. But there's a lot of security advantages to using, like, for example, the Zoe API mediation layer, which I mentioned.
Yeah, that's a very interesting. And then it's really interesting because a lot of the things that you were talking about on the code being out there, in a way kind of makes what the saying is all bugs are shallow when you have a lot of eyes on it. I think that is something that is that trade-off in there. And Zoe has put a ton of work into this. We see in a lot of our other projects as well. where we have a foundation here called the OpenSSF, the Open Source Security Foundation, that has worked to bring really the strongest minds together on the best practices around security. And they have built a number of guidelines and tools and resources that these projects are all benefiting from. Where, because the reality of security is just changing. It's often been thought of from a penetration aspect, but the growing area is on the software supply chain of things. And I think this is an opportunity where open source stands out because that entire lineage and provenance is on display. And Zoe does a great job of making sure that not only the user understands that, but at the same time, it takes heavy care of what all of those dependencies are, what their status of maintain is, what open security issues that might be in there, and makes that very transparent, so that you as an end user can see that, which is something, so often you see in commercial and closed source software that is not as made apparent, and it is harder to tell. And so in a lot of the ways, they say a rising tide lifts all boats. The software is made more secure because everybody gets to see it. And therefore there's more rigor that gets put on it than you would see in a closed source world.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention another thing that came to mind is when we launched first the Zoe Conformance program to make sure that all products integrating with Zoe behaved as proper citizens. That gained confidence. And then we had a Zoe Conformance support provider program where Zoe has some of the largest vendors in mainframe supporting it. And from that aspect, customers that sort of addresses their concerns about getting support for the software, enterprise support for the software. And I also like to think about it like multiple vendors are Zoe support providers, right? So in a way, you're having multiple folks supporting this open source project. So it kind of doubles up on the support benefit there in a way.
Yeah, and and those requirements for all those are set by the community. So it's not like a vendor is setting this, like it's set by the community objectively. So you can have a sense of confidence that, hey, if I need support, if I'm looking for applications and tools that are built on top of this, these are the groups of people that have, and also all those vendors invest in this community, whether they're putting developer resources or a number of them, or all of them are putting funding in as well. So they're not just taking, but they're taking and giving and putting back into because they realize what the commons value is there, which is a very fantastic piece there. Rochelle and Jelly, I think Michael, I kind of got off conversation here. I don't know if you've had anything to add to any of that.
Yeah, for me, the other part of the open source like barrier / opportunity is that sometimes people are hesitant to try it out, but it's because they find certain barriers. But to me, those barriers could be something that you can contribute because you see that it's missing and it's open source, and then you can become a contributor and fix that issue. So we've seen that when I was working with Zoe Explorer, we saw people who are saying they want this feature, but then for example, it's lower in the priority for the team. And so they would come in and actually go and fix it. So to me, I think the barriers could become their marching orders as well. This could be your jumping off point into this community. So if you see something and you think, oh, maybe that's not for me because our use case is not there, then maybe you should contribute that use case to Zoe or to your open source project.
Open source is a duocracy. Meaning people that get to make the decisions are the ones that show up and do the work. People that are chopping wood, carrying water, they're the ones. Even within the project itself, people who are contributing code over, you're not signing your code and your rights over to someone else. You keep that ownership. It's the same way the Linux kernel works, in Kubernetes and the number of the Linux Foundation projects and even projects, broadly than that. You make the decisions, you're willing, you think that feature is important. You're not waiting for another vendor to say it's important. You get to jump in there and say, okay, I think it's important. Here's the code. Here's to do it. I'm jumping in and doing it. Or, hey, this fix in here, as opposed to waiting for when a vendor wants to kind of integrate it. You get to jump right in there and say, hey, you know what? I think this is important. Here it is. Let's work it in. And I think we see time and time again, the Zoe community is like, this is fantastic. We
Yeah.
love this. Like, we're happy to take all that in. And they put a lot of rigor into it too, to make sure that, it's hitting a lot of quality, security, it's not breaking things and whatnot. But I think, Rochelle, that's a point that people don't often sort of realize as a customer, you have the seat at the table of where this is going. You're not steps away from it, like if in a vendor relationship. That's a really, really good point. Jelly, I know I don't know if you have any thoughts you'd want to add.
No more. I think they've covered everything. So
Awesome. Well, I think we're kind of getting close to the back end of this here. And we've had some great questions from the audience here. Maybe as a way to pull it together here, I guess two things I'd ask of each of you. One is what is something that you would recommend to the audience as they would be looking at this and maximizing their career and their growth? And then maybe this might even be the same answer, but maybe even a corollary is that there's a tip you would leave someone based upon the experiences that you have had? What would that be? And maybe Jelly, why don't you start since we've kind of skipped over you here a little bit here.
For me, I always give this advice to others and as well as to myself. It's like always be curious, and whatever it is that you're doing, talk about it. Because sometimes when you talk about it, you think of more ideas. It's sharing it as well as gaining something different. Maybe somebody gave you a feedback that you didn't really thought about, and then you can do something about it, and increase more of your knowledge. For me, that's my one tip.
That's excellent. Rochelle, Michael, whichever one you want to jump on this first.
Sure. So to me, it's going back to the learning mentality. Have that learning mentality, ask questions, and connected to the question about resource. I think if I'm curious about a project and it's an open source project, I go to the repository. I find the code, I test it out, build it out myself. And to me, that's way to gain your knowledge. And also maybe you would want to contribute to that project as well. So a lot of the projects that we use, for example, when doing open source integration, maybe you can find a particular feature there that's useful to you that is not that widely advertised. So to me, just looking at open source repositories, and then usually in these repositories, there's links to their Slack channel, there's links to how the community talks to each other, or even just in the issues part of the repository, you can communicate and be part of that project. And so to me, just being curious about this new stuff and going to the repositories and participating in it, I think you will find that niche that you alone can fulfill in that community. So to me, that's where I would suggest.
That's great advice. Michael.
Yeah, I would honestly just stick with the theme here of be curious. And then my recommendation would probably specifically depend on sort of your experience level. If you're curious about mainframe and you really haven't had any experience on mainframe, I'd say take a look at the COBOL programming course. Get access to a hands-on system and try to learn that way. If you do have mainframe experience, but you're interested in the open source side, try to join one of these open source projects, or maybe just join the community on Slack, and you'll have a lot of folks asking mainframe questions, and you'll be able to help them there. And then particularly within your organization, if you're fairly new to a team, don't be afraid to ask questions. You're bringing value, and we need to learn together. And if you have a lot of experience, teach the folks who are joining your teams, work with them, and maybe collaborate on different ideas on, I showed you how I've been doing it for a while. Do you have any ideas on this or any thoughts on, how we can do it differently? And maybe that doesn't end up changing anything, but maybe it does. Maybe they bring a new idea to the table and you can find a way to move forward and collaborate together. Because Jelly has this one blog out there, and if you just search on Medium, I'm not sure what the name of the blog is, but I typically recommend this as well. It talks about, you're new to mainframe and you might not be necessarily sure of yourself, but we want you to succeed, you know, and a lot of folks want to contribute a lot of value quickly. You know, they want to make their mark, make their contribution. I think a lot of these tools, like Zoe CLI, like Zoe Explore, and even beyond the Zoe project underneath the OMP umbrella, will help you be effective in doing that.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think a theme I hear here is jump in, be curious, learn, like, and I think as you describe this community is, if you're that way, people aren't going to be apprehensive. They're going to be excited. And they're eager as much to teach as you might be as eager to learn, which I think it's a fascinating thing. I mean, you don't see that in every community, and so I think it's a real fascinating thing. I run into so many people in this community, especially ones that might have been 30, 40 years into this, and what they care about the most is that folks like you have the same appreciation that they have, and that you can be that carrying forward to then carry it forward to the next group of people who will then continue to take it forward. I mean, 60 years is not it's not one generation's work, it's multiple generations. And I think it's a fascinating thing. We don't have a lot of examples of that in technology, but I think this one is a really cool one. Well, cool. Well, I think we're just about to the end here. I want to thank, we have a great panelist, great conversation. We had some good, great comments from the audience as well. All of these folks here are very accessible in our communities. So if you even jump into our Slack communities, you're going to find each of them. That's probably a great way to just even get involved there is, slack.openmainframeproject.org. Jelly, Michael, and Rochelle are all very active in there. You can ping them in there. They'll answer questions. They can connect you to folks. We sent some links in the chat here to our podcast, to the programming course, which is one of our great projects. And there's a number of others you can hunt around on the website. And then again on the mentorship program, which if you're looking to have that inroad there to really start to jump in, apply, because some of the work that is being done is fascinating and could really use that expertise from that next generation to drive it forward. So thank you all. Thank you to the GSE UK folks for inviting us to do this panel. And we hope you enjoy the rest of this virtual event.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Neil, back to you.
Thank you very much. I mean, actually, the pleasure's all ours, because this is a fantastic session, and I think it's nice to hear perspectives instead of just from individuals, but from a community. So huge thanks from GSE, and I'm sure the audience. I know Andy's just put something in there. I'm sure the audience really appreciated it. I would remind everyone, please do try to submit the feedback where possible. Very, very valuable. As I say, the speakers, the panelists, and for GSE as an organisation. And maybe bookmark those links now, because the recording might not be up for at least a few days, a few weeks. So definitely check those out. The Open Mainframe project's COBOL programming course is fantastic, and Sudarshana does a really great job with that. So I highly recommend. And I'll have to inquire about getting onto the I Am a Mainframer podcast myself. So
absolutely. And one thing I did also forget to mention is one thing we are working on for open source communities and is going to be live this summer is a mainframe, actual mainframe infrastructure that we're going to be funding through the Open Mainframe project. That's going to be available for all of these open source projects. So, if you're running into projects out there that's like, oh, geez, this is really a good project, I wish it really worked better on the mainframe, hook those maintainers up with us, and we can help get them that build infrastructure so they can better support the platform.
You heard it here first, folks. It's all happening.
It's coming together. It's coming together. We have a lot of them. We have such a strong a community and a group of companies behind that are helping fund this effort, and it's really sort of revolutionizing and changing and really setting mainframe up for another 60 years of success.
But that's like you said earlier. It's nice to have a system or a setup, sorry, where it's not like a monarchy or a sort of anything like that. It's all very much like everyone contributes, everyone feels like a part of the community. Even if, as Michael actually touched on, even if that's just documentation. I know I've been on some panels in the past, and Joe Winchester's a big advocate for open source, open mainframe project, and I sort of said, what place do I have in this community? Because I don't know code well enough to contribute. And he said, but the documentation is really important. And that's something that I'm now working with him and some other people with, because I think, like you say, that everyone can contribute, and it makes you feel like you're a part of something bigger.
Oh, absolutely. And you're kind of in your knowledge and expertise, even if you don't think it has value, it does have value. And these communities look for that. They yearn for it. And they're so very approachable. I mean, Jelly, Michael, Rochelle, they're probably some of the most approachable people, you'd run into. And the whole community is like that. So never feel intimidated by this. And it's really strong people that care about this technology and are excited when other people do too as well, and they want to share that knowledge. I mean, I think that's a theme that I think I heard it again and again from these panelists.
And they wouldn't be here if they didn't care. So if anyone in the audience does want to reach out and ask questions, any more questions, as John sort of touched on, these are all very friendly faces, and do feel free to kind of reach out. Better to have an answer to a burning question than to sort of sit on it and let it fester. So I think we'll wrap it up there then, folks, just because I think we're slightly over time. But I mean, fantastic session, really, really enjoyable, and I'm looking forward to hopefully inviting yourselves back to GSE events more in the future.
We look forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. All the best. Have a good day.
Bye.